As you've heard me say before, here in Melbourne and in Victoria, we're very lucky to have many people engaged in fighting climate change. And I've only been at it for 2 years. I really admire those people that have been at it for 10 years or 20 years. But in that time, two of the most impressive climate change thinkers and doers that I have met are with us here tonight. David Spratt will speak first, and I guess you could say that first he'll be talking about the why. Why do we have to fight climate change? Why do we have to do it urgently? Why is the government not yet doing enough? But then Matthew's going to come up and he's going to talk about the what. What do we have to do? What does the future look like? And what are the solutions to climate change? And then David will come up for a few more minutes as well and talk about the how. How do we make this all happen? So I'm looking forward to that. And then we'll have your questions after that. So let me introduce our first speaker, and that's David Spratt. David Spratt is a Melbourne businessman, climate policy analyst, and co-founder of Carbon Equity. David has extensive advocacy experience in the peace movement and in developing community campaign communications and marketing strategies. And furthermore, David is co-author, along with fellow Melburnian Philip Sutton, also shown in the photo there, of Climate Code Red, the case for emergency action. And in this slide you can see, just in July this year, Victoria's Governor, Dr. David de Kretser, launching the book at Parliament House, a fantastic event. And the Governor said, "This book draws on a vast array of information to build a cogent and compelling case that we do have a genuine emergency on our hands." This was coming from the Governor. This is an amazing book. At the launch, the publisher, Scribe Publications, said it was the most important book they had ever published. And you can see that my copy is getting a bit worn out. And that's happening also with people around the world. Some of you would know the names of the UK climate thinkers and doers, George Monbiot and Jeremy Leggett. They're about to launch the Climate Safety Report. And in their words, the Climate Safety Report in the UK is modelled on the Australian Climate Code Red and delivers a clear message that to have any chance of maintaining a safe climate, we must rapidly decarbonise our society, preserve global carbon sinks, and address the problem with an unprecedented degree of seriousness. David, we invite you to speak.
Thanks very much, Tim. Thanks for those who organised it, and thank you for coming along, because it's a conversation we all have to have, and I think it's the most important thing at the moment, because those who are making decisions in this society about politicians talk to us a lot, but they don't converse with us very often. 3 years ago, America's most eminent climate scientist, a bloke called James Hansen, who heads climate science for NASA, wrote a famous and somewhat controversial essay in which he said, "We are on the precipice of climate tipping points beyond which there is no redemption." He'd previously given Congress, testimony to the Congress in 1988, and then again this year, in July, on the 20th anniversary, he went back to the American Congress to talk about climate change, and he said that the elements of a perfect storm, a global cataclysm, are already assembled. So I'm going to try and run a 1.5 minute mile and look at that science and why he said those things. Greenhouse gases are increasing really rapidly because of our activity. The chart shows fossil fuel emissions. You can see they've gone up really rapidly since the Second World War and the technological changes that produced. They are now responsible for 85% of the greenhouse gases, the burning of oil, coal, gas, and so on. What that means is that they're actually going up more quickly each decade. Between 1990 and 1999, our fossil fuel emissions went up 1% a year. In the first 7 years of this decade, they've gone up 3.5% a year. So not only are they going up, they're going up more quickly, and the problem is getting worse more quickly. And in fact, if you look at Australia in the decade between 1994 and 2004, if you take out land use and forestry, our emissions went up 38% in a decade. So we are not immune from this. That's 85%. The other 15% is deforestation. You know the pictures, you've seen the stories, particularly from Asia, from Indonesia, and from the Amazon. And those forests are being devastated not only by human activity but also by warming and drying weather conditions, particularly in eastern Amazonia, that it's now predicted by 2050 that wildfires will ravage those forests and they'll grow back not as rainforest but as savanna. So the problem is severe. 85% fossil fuel emissions, 15% destruction of forests. And the consequence is simple. This is greenhouse gas emissions as measured in the atmosphere. It's in parts per million. In 1750, before we started, there was 280 parts per million. Now it's 387 parts per million. So the amount of greenhouse gases in the air because of human activity has been driven up by 40%. And that figure of 387, I want you to put in the back of your minds because we will come back to it. Because it's a figure we have to think about really, really honestly. And the consequence of that, of course, is that global temperatures are going up. And for those who read The Australian and get a deniers article every second day, let me just give you three figures. In the 1980s, global temperatures were 0.26 of a degree above the base, 0.26. In the 1990s, they were 0.40 above the base, and so far this century they are 0.62 above the base. So in the last 3 decades, 0.26, 0.40, 0.62, we are not cooling the planet, we are warming it. And there's more in the pipeline because of lags or inertia in the climate system. For the current level of greenhouse gases, while the average now is less than a degree, we are going to see 2 or 3 degrees for the current level of greenhouse gases. If we stopped tomorrow, didn't put any more up there, we would still get to 2 or 2.5 degrees. And that will mean a planet with no ice in the northern hemisphere, sea levels 25 metres higher than they are now, and so on. So we're taking the planet to a place where we have never been before. And there's one really easy way to see that. This is a chart of the last 20,000 years of global temperatures. And you can see on the left, in the last ice age, the temperature is about 5 degrees cooler than it was. And about 10,000 years ago, we came out of the last ice age, and for that last 10,000 years, the temperature has varied around a very narrow band, that blue band. It's never gone more than 3/4 of a degree above or below that band. So we have been in this zone in which we have constructed human civilization. We have settled on river deltas, we have farmed river deltas, we have built ports, we have built facilities, we've had climate patterns that have allowed us to live in certain places. That's what we call the safe zone, a zone where we have been able to exist as a species and develop our culture and our infrastructure. And now we are about to go out of that zone and up to the right to somewhere we have never been before. And that is not going to be safe for us or for most species. And I'll show you why. If you look at Victorian rainfall, this is August. And you can see in the last 50 years, the average rainfall has dropped by 1/3, in fact about 40%, which is far more than any of the climate models and the climate scientists predicted. So those who think that climate change is in the future, it's not, it's now. We hear targets for 2020, 2030, 2050. That's the wrong message. The problem is not in the future. The problem was yesterday. We recognise it now, and now it is already severe, so time is short. In fact, one of the terrible predictions at 2 or 3 degrees is that El Nino conditions around the world will become semi-permanent. Those are the conditions that produce those dry years and those hot years. And it is predicted the El Ninos will become a common event. Global warming is happening more quickly at the poles because of the way the climate system works. You can see the brown colour there where it's already up by more than 2 degrees.